Before he dropped out of college, he would go to sports games on campus for the school newspaper. He had never particularly liked any sports in his life, but he learned what constituted exciting play. He wrote notes about the best moments in a small notebook with a pencil, describing the games though paled when compared to photographing them. He would line up the school's athletes in his viewfinder and would track their strides up close. The athletes of his school were sculptures of muscular confidence, agile in every movement. They were fine athletes at their finest hour. He would hold them in space at the end of his lens until they struck or threw the ball, and as their exertions splashed across their faces, their bodies wholly engaged, he would machine gun shudder the living hell out of them. He especially liked the baseball games because the field was so well lit and the players so stationary. He could shoot those with a lower ISO. It was best when the outfielders would stand under a fly ball, glove raised in the park light. That was cover stock. The newspaper loved those shots, and also ones at the end of the game when the team would crowd together at the center of the field, cheering, gesturing their superiority, hugs and smiles, arms wrapping shoulders, sweat. When the school's team lost, he always made sure to point out their greatest efforts and speculate that the officials' questionable calls may have influenced the outcome. The paper didn't mind this small editorial commentary. In that way, the sports heroes could seem forever morally superior to other schools' teams. That was good for the school. That was good for everyone at the school. The sports heroes weren't always good, of course, but the newspaper wouldn't contain anything like that. Negative things weren't good for anyone. Once, a memo went around to the entire staff of the newspaper with that written at the top. Negative things aren't good for anyone. He hadn't forgotten that. The paper was definitely not known for printing negative things, like when that point guard brought that 15-year-old girl to his dorm room. The paper didn't print anything about that because it was definitely a negative thing. And so were phrases like stockpiled flunitrazepam, and ongoing investigation, and repeatedly sodomized. As for him, he didn't like to think about bad things either. He tried not to think about bad things like all of the time, but sometimes he couldn't stop it. Sometimes bad thoughts just came into his head. He almost always had bad thoughts, for instance, when he would be sent to photograph the volleyball games. He would look through his lens and watch for those moments of action that were photographs before he even pushed the button. He would frame a serve, for instance, and would pop the shutter when he knew the contact point must come. Then he would review the shot on the screen. It always went well when the volleyball team was serving. After the action, though, in those moments when the back and forth was inscrutable to the camera, he would find himself watching the players rather than the game. They were young, these women, these girls. Their uniforms fit like brightly colored alien skin. Their athletic socks encircling tense calves, each ending in identical pairs of bright white Reebok sneakers. These bopped against the surface of the gymnasium floor, and the bodies above stretched upward, skyward, reaching. Then they fell in flames and steam, like comets crashing into the wood, spring-loaded, predator eyes scanning the air for spherical prey. He was in love with all of them, collectively and individually, and had memorized the details of their bodies, where they curved or jutted or swept. He gave them new names in his mind: buzz cut, red knees, short smiley society. It was all athletically appropriate, of course, the skin-tight clothing, the glowing pelts, hugging tightly to their anatomy. He knew it was athletically appropriate to wear such bright, tight, small clothing. He could not, though, stop himself picturing the soft flesh beneath the neon, could not cease imagining peeling back damp cloth, exposing taut limbs. He could not help tasting the sweat on swaths of conditioned skin. He lapped greedily at them with his mind tongue. He frequently left before the ends of volleyball matches and wrote clinical descriptions of the play-by-play after. It had to be short and colorless. His lust, he feared, would stick out of some turn of phrase, some untoward observation, like a chapped red dick. And then it would be all over. He didn't want it to be over. Sometimes he worried that he had already drawn suspicion, that he had given himself away, maybe to the editor, maybe to an administrator. Even now, he imagined they were sending in a professional who could spot his hands trembling on his camera, jittering the focus ring. He worried that they would notice pinpricks of sweat on his shirt between his shoulder blades that spread to a dark patch before even an hour in the gymnasium. They might spot the way he stood and say, "There he is! There's the pervert." So before matches would end, before crowds, before congratulations